Good morning. I really thank the Chatham House for this invitation, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. The issue of our discussion is European democracy in crisis is really a very complicated, difficult, and a very crucial one. The question is posed on two different levels. On the first refers to the European level, and it has to do with the institution, the European institution, and the functioning and the trust of people to the European institution. And at the same time, the dangerous amplification of inequalities between North and South, something which becomes really dangerous and destabilizes the social and economic balance of the European Union and threaten the unit, and not only the unity, it threatens, I believe, the existence of the European Union. So on the first level, it is the European question. On the second is the democracy at the national level. And it concerns mainly countries which have been directly and severely hit by the crisis. This is where I want to focus in my first remarks, because it is really difficult to speak for democracy at the European level if democracy is in danger or is undermined at the national level, and particularly because of the crisis. Some remarks about the crisis. The crisis is a global crisis, and it is the result of specific past political decisions, decisions which initiated a wave of deregulation of the financial markets, which endangered the global economic system, and in the end of the day, the citizens had to bear the burden of this and the bailouts of and the consequences of this crisis. And I believe that the citizens, not only in Greece and Europe, but the United States as well, have not accepted and have not forgiven it. The crisis is a European crisis because we very well know, we knew it, that the euro presented architectural deficiencies since its inception. And at the same time, we understood very well that the Eurozone control mechanisms proved inadequate during the crisis. And the crisis is a national one, and we can see that economies of the periphery came with their own structural particularities. And there are big differences from country to the country, in the south of the periphery country, and there are big differences concerning the reasons of the crisis. These three crises, I could say, the global, the European, and the national, converged in Greece at the same moment in 2010. It converged in the form of a sovereign debt crisis, and it was the perfect crisis, as we say, the perfect storm. I will dwell in the Greek example as other countries experience a subset of the Greek problems. As a minister of a government who experienced in the most dramatic of ways the onset of the crisis, having faced the risk of my country's bankruptcy being only 20 days away, I would like to give you some insights and, of course, to link them with the problems of democracy that we face today. Immediately, a few days after the crisis, after Greece could not enter the international markets, the Greek government had agreed a program, a rolling and adjustment program with we called it Troika, which is EU, IMF, and the European Bank. They agreed a program which is called Mnemonion, and this Mnemonion is the main instrument in order to recover from the crisis. At that moment, 3 years ago, the Greek government trusted and agreed with the most prominent institutions in the world. it was the IMF, it was the European Union, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and they agreed on a program with many structural reforms and a program with many austerity measures. It was packages of austerity measures. The three organizations more or less interpreted the demands of the financial markets, and the Greek government had no alternative. I mean, at the time, it had no bargaining power. I'm not focused on why, at a national level, we were at that moment, because it was a problem of mismanagement, of bad political system, of clientelism. There were big problems. But at that particular time, there was no bargaining power. The program was imposed. And I think it is very interesting politically to see what the problems, what the errors were of both sides, because we have the repeat of this project in other countries, and I'm afraid that we will see it in other countries as well. In a very brief, some very brief comments about these errors. The memorandum set out over-ambitious targets and unrealistic time frames. IMF studies 2 weeks ago considered that the magnitude of the recession caused by the fiscal adjustment was underestimated. And I will show you some figures what this underestimated means. There was a decision for a shock therapy, but a shock therapy is not a therapy for a country. Maybe it is for a company, but when it is a therapy for a country, it means that somebody has to pay with human pain, and the victims are particularly youth and the weakest. And I think we must not underestimate the impact of the role and the impact and the role of the European leaders' intervention during the crisis. For 2 years, there was at least 2 statements every day from European leaders, journalists, academics, about the Greek exit of the euro. How could a country, how could the government stabilize the situation, attract investors for the privatizations, when every day there is a threat that Greece would leave the exit? This was from the side of the Troika and the problems of the memorandum. The Greek government. The Greek government proceeded leisurely at the onset of the crisis and postponed tough decisions. Most ministers of the Socialist Party at that time refused to assume the ownership of the project. It was not a national project. It was something which was imposed by the others. Out of the 23 ministers of the government, there were only 4 who have supported, I was one of them, who have supported the reforms, who have supported even the austerity measures. 3 of them have not been re-elected. I am among them. All opposition parties, with no exception, New Democracy included, now it is in the ruling party in the coalition of the government, all parties were against the recovery plan, were against the memorandum, against the measures, against the reforms. More or less the same with unions, labor unions, and more or less the same with the media. So there was not political unity to face with the problem, and just take into account that this has been decided in 3 months, literally in 20 days. On the top of that, and on the top of the imposed measures, it was obvious that in the whole concept there was no social justice, and there was the great failure of the governments in the past, of the governments now during the crisis, to combat tax evasion and to implement radical reforms in the public sector, in the public administration. And these were 2 of the very important issues that make people feel that there was really no social justice. So, in the end of the day, The political system wastes political capital, wastes resources, wastes time, and the people's patience and trust eroded. And the major problem is the trust of citizens to the political system. I would like just in figures to show you the situation. Here was the situation in 2010. You can see the numbers, you can see how terrible the situation was. Greece faced prohibitive interest rates in the markets. So Greece was excluded by the markets. These are the achievements of the adjustment program. It is really outraging. I mean, the OECD has written in an analysis that in the economics history, there was never an adjustment like that in the fiscal figures in such a small period. It is in 2 years. And this is the achievement in the adjustment in the fiscal program. Things go well. And this year are even better. At the same time, what were the effects of the adjustment program? Please see the numbers. Unemployment, 26.8%. Youth unemployment, 56.6%. 62% for young women. And you can see the cuts in the public sector, in the private sector. In the average nominal pension cuts, it is 16%, but there are pensions where the cuts are more than 50%. I'll give you an interesting example. Here is the fuel price increase in 3 years, from 2010 to 2013. Why there was such an increase? Because through taxation, the program wanted to have more revenue. There was not even €1 more concerning the revenue. Not even €1. What was the result? The result was this big smog over Athens in 3 months, because people do not use petroleum, they don't buy petroleum. And it is, I've just found this, what happened in London 60 years ago, the big smog. It is a phenomenon like this. So it was really a big mistake. There was no estimation. There was just numbers and figures. We're going to raise the tax and cut the pensions and cut the salaries, and then we have more money. No, we don't have money, and we have side effects. After this, there are just a few numbers to understand that it is now, this is a problem of social crisis, because with these figures, at the social level, with this kind of unemployment, it is very, very difficult to have a social peace to discuss about democracy. And I think that all of us, from the highlands of Scotland to the Mediterranean shores of Paphos, from Constanza in Romania to Lisbon in the Atlantic Ocean, all us Europeans who share the common European ideals of democracy, freedom, equal opportunities, tolerance, and the rule of law, I think we have to answer to a question. Can there be real democracy when 1 in 2 youngsters is unemployed and 13% of citizens live in households that have no income? I think that this is the major question, and now it is reality in Greece, but it is more than 150 million people in Europe that day by day feel these consequences, and there are explosive conditions, I'm afraid, in many societies. Now, let me focus on we have a couple of issues concerning the components of democracy. What is the problem now in the country? There is no legitimization, there is a minimal legitimization in the government and in the political system. There is no trust because we have 3 different versions of the memorandum, and each time we changed it, it became worse and worse because the reforms need time to have results on the one side, and the austerity measures on the other side give no hope. So, problem of legitimization, problem of trust. At the same time, there is a real problem in the democratic procedures. I give you an example. Legislation was passed in haste. 248 laws in 24 months. Just imagine what it means in terms of democratic procedures. Members of the parliament had the choice of either voting the legislation in question or being expelled by their parties. And there was no time to build a consensus, a minimum consensus among citizens. The rise of, after the legitimization and trust issue and the democratic procedures, let me focus a bit on the populism and nationalism. We can see everywhere in Europe, not only in Greece, we can see it in Austria, in Finland, in France, in many countries, we can see the rise of nationalist sentiments. On the one side, people need to maintain their identity, which appears to be the safest of harbors amidst the menacing turmoil. But we should not underestimate the negative effects on self-esteem and national pride of South people with all these anti-South stereotypes that flourished in Europe, particularly in the last 2 years. There is an environment of fear and uncertainty. There is an environment that a young person has no hope to find a job. And this is the perfect ground for populism to flourish. The effects, so when we have this loss of legitimization, no trust, populism and nationalism, then how does the political system accept all this? What is the impact in the political system? I will show you a very interesting, don't scare, I will explain it immediately. This is the result, I try to do it very simply, you will understand it, the result of the elections and what has been illustrated in the elections. Look, the green light. This green light is PASOK. It was one of the mainstream parties for 40 years after the dictatorship, and it was one of the 2 mainstream parties. In 2009, it was 43. In 2 years' time, it went to 13%. And we had 2 elections, and one in May and one in June. So 30% in 2 years. The blue line is the other mainstream party, which is the Conservatives. From 33 in 2009, they went in 18 in May, and then 29 in June, particularly because there was the fear of the radical left, which the radical left from 4.6 went in 2 years to 26.9. And this is the case now. In the polls, the radical left is first or second party. And the most important one, the Nazi party, from 0.29, it didn't exist, it became to 6, it was in 6.9 here. And today, it is the third party with 11%, and there is an increase day by day. There is, do we have time to present something very brief? Just to present I would like you just to have, I'm not going to read, just have a very quick reading of these paragraphs. So, if you read this, maybe you believe that this text comes from Greek newspapers. That would have been a realistic assessment, but it is not. Unfortunately, these texts refer to the Weimar Republic between 1920 and 1923. But we could have exactly the same, you could read exactly the same in the Greek newspapers. So, to make a conclusion, the question if there is a crisis in democracy, it is yes, there is a crisis in democracies. Not only because of the financial crisis, there was a problem, but now the financial crisis has created a huge problem at the national level. And economic stability is a prerequisite for democracy. And it is obvious at the European Union, because of the Eurozone, that we cannot have in many countries now economic stability if European Union, if the European institutions do not play a very important role. And the question now, and I believe we discuss it in the second part, is what kind of intervention, what kind of Europe, what changes and reforms we need now at the European level. Thank you.